So yeah, this video is just about it's this month's character video, before or after Christmas, one of the two, who knows. And it's one of my favourite shows of the last couple of years. I only discovered it, was it last year, the year before? And it's called Disenchantment, and it's made by the same folks who make Simpsons and Futurama. But this one is kind of set in magical medieval times, in a place called Dreamland. Have I made that up? Am I not prepared for this one? Of course it's Dreamland. What's up with me? And it's primarily about this this unconventional princess called Bean. I will give you her full name later. And her kind of wacky adventure. Well, not quite wacky. It's fairly tame and it's funny, but it's kind of, I'd say it's almost got a kind of British style level of absurdity and daftness and stuff, and it's very enjoyable. She has magical friends, a devil and an elf. We'll go into them later. She's kind of the heir under her father. Her mother may come back, and her mother's quite some kind of crazy link to the underworld kind of person. And you know, she in the end she finds love, and it has a kind of sort of happy ending. Well, a bittersweet happy ending. It's an excellent show, and it's charming, and it's light and easygoing, you know. It's not anything too serious, and if you haven't watched it, I'd recommend it. I'm not going to go on like on and on and on. It's one of them where there's not loads of kind of statements made or hidden meanings or reflections of society, although a little bit. That's all. I mean, this shouldn't be a particularly long video, because it's just a brief kind of fun overview of the characters, but you know me, can't make any promises. So yeah, we'll get started. So first up, we're going to start with one of the kind of secondary characters, actually one of my favourite characters, and that's Bunty. Now Bunty is Bean's maid. She's also kind of the person who brought Bean up. She's married to the local executioner. It's quite funny, and she lives in absolute poverty, and she brings up loads and loads of kids. She's quite maternal in her own kind of way. It's her only way of knowing and what have you. And she's also very kind of dry and working class, and they've kind of given her a northern accent, and she is pretty caring and what have you, but there's little bits of kind of what you'd expect for somebody in this time that kind of slips out. You know, Bean will say something and she'll go, "Oh, that's alright, Mum, when the revolution comes I'll chop off your head and use it as a bowling ball." And yeah, she's quite feisty and revolutionary, as she should be. I'm not going to make these really kind of long, especially for like a secondary character, but she runs through the whole kind of seasons, and obviously she supports Bean in that kind of maternal way all throughout. Now, because she's from you know, kind of absolute poverty and what have you, it's quite hard to pick her a fragrance. I do think she'd wear one, because she'd want to smell good at work and impressive, wouldn't she? And I suspect she'd probably steal lots of Bean's kind of stuff, wouldn't she, in reality? Or wear some clone or what have you. So what I've actually picked is from Soaky, London, and it's called Aphrodite. Now it is kind of a bit of a clone of something else. It's priced at I mean, it's a small brand, so it's understandable, but of course it's priced much higher than it's, you know, subjectively what I think it's worth and what have you. But it's a fairly kind of easygoing fragrance. It's nothing flashy, nothing special. It's kind of just like shampoo with and conditioner with a slight tropical hint. Because of its price, and it's got like quite a gimmicky bottle. She'd probably think it was, it's quite special and what have you. So, and she probably wear quite a lot of it, and it's nothing overly challenging or out there or crazy. And maybe this could be the fragrance that starts the revolution and what have you. So for Bunty, it's Aphrodite from Soaky London Fragrances. Right. Next up is the character Odval, he's kind of the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, whatever you want to call him. He kind of almost would say he's a little bit based on Varys from Game of Thrones. He's kind of doesn't really have any loyalties. Not even to himself. He does kind of want the best for the kingdom as such, but he's always up to all sorts of mischief. He has 3 eyes as well, which is quite interesting, like a soul eye, if you like hidden under his hat that he always wears. He always wears like quite glamorous robes and stuff, and he's quite into organising orgies amongst everyone. That's kind of what keeps them going, and he has secret little clubs and organisations that are all based around orgies ultimately. He's quite sneaky and quite sly, but he's never really up to anything particularly bad. Again, he is trying to do what's best, sort of. He's quite abused and treated pretty badly by Zog, the king. Yeah, and he's quite close mates with the wizard. Can't remember his name. It'll come to me. And that they organise all these sex parties and stuff together. So he's quite a funny, kind of devious. He is the kind of the clever one. He does what he does seem to be for the best of Dreamland ultimately. And he gets his jip and what have you. And what I've picked for him is Chanel's Missia. Again, this is the kind of Varys connection. He's not particularly as kind of asexual as Varys. Obviously he's not, because he's up to all of his orgies and whatnot, but this is a kind of beautiful boudoir, kind of kinky kind of sex party one you could imagine in the 1920s, and that all the kind of violets and iris and the little sweet cheeky fruits in there and a little touch of leather and stuff. And I think again, for a kind of intelligent noble Prime Minister of the time, I think it would quite suit him really. It's also important to say he gets his happily ever after Odval as well, because he marries Cesario at the end of it. So yeah, for Odval is Chanel's Missia. So next is Prince Merkimer. Now Prince Merkimer comes from a slightly different kingdom, and he's kind of there sort of by accident actually. Bean is meant to marry his brother at the beginning. Unfortunately, his brother meets a terrible fate where he doesn't die. He lingers on a long time despite many accidents. But anyway, Merkimer is also a kind of handsome, rugged, kind of full of beans kind of person, played by Matt Berry, who's obviously fantastic. Now Merkimer, again, quite arrogant, thinks he's quite a ladies' man and what have you, so he does end up saving Dreamland by mistake after having an orgy with loads of walruses, after presuming they're mermaids. So yeah, Bean in the end agrees to marry him, except Merkimer, well, he accidentally drinks some magic elf's blood mixed with pig's blood and ends up transforming into a pig with his body the pig's mind in it. Anyway, don't worry about that. He becomes a pig, and he's kind of a suiting kind of irony, and he kind of still is Merkimer in this pig with this pig attitude. If you go back to his kingdom, where he's quite selfish again, and he tries to take over the kingdom with the pig, who's also Merkimer. Anyway, but that doesn't, you know, he realises that they quite like him and they're quite fair to him and stuff. And he just generally is this kind of selfish, conceited, misogynist kind of pig with Matt Berry's voice for the whole thing. And what I've picked for him is really obvious, isn't it? It's Creed's Aventus. Would he wear anything else? He would wear something that he thinks makes him smell like a hot stud. It would obviously be very expensive. He does come from the richest kingdom and what have you. It doesn't really matter whether it smells great or whatever. It's just it's the best. It's the king fragrance, isn't it? And I just think it suits him really well. We all know Aventus without me going through it. Bergamot, pineapple, patchouli, ambergris, stroke, ambroxan. It is what it is. It's been copied a million times and is very generic, and yeah, suits Merkimer really well. So for Prince Merkimer is Creed's Aventus. We then have Queen Oona, who is a kind of amphibian from, I can't remember where she's from. I'll probably pop it up. But she was meant to marry Zog's brother, but kind of Game of Thronesy. He dies, and so she ends up marrying Zog. And they kind of have to get married to secure an alliance, a bit like Bean and Merkimer. But anyway, she's crazy. There's a politician here, James cleverly called most of his government's nonsense batshit crazy. She's mental. She's obviously been stepmom, so there's a bit of that kind of going on. But when the queen who died comes back, I shall go into that later. She's kind of, you think she's possibly the bad person, Oona, but she's not. She also has a son, Derek, with Zog, who's heir to the throne. Derek is I'll mention Derek briefly. He's not really a made enough character later as well. But Oona, yeah, she decides after all this has happened, she finds herself upon a ship where she becomes a pirate, and she becomes a pirate queen, one of the best there's ever been, and kind of, yeah, starts going on journeys and taking over. Her relationship with Bean improves. She's quite into her drugs, Oona, and she uses them to escape. And yeah, she's just quite mental, quite fierce, and obviously a brilliant kind of captain. There's not much more to say about her. There's not much. She was obviously not loved by her own people either, which is a bit of a shame. When you go to meet them, they're not the nicest of people. But anyway, what have I picked for Oona? Well, I've picked Killian Smoke for the Soul. Now, this was quite a tricky one to pick. It's not actually, she isn't smoking, how do we say it, the old wacky backy. She's on much heavier stuff than that. But we'll play it kind of that. And she comes from like a swampland kind of area. So that kind of green, dark, foresty enough feel kind of suits it a bit as well, I think. Smoke for the Soul it's not your skanky weed, it's nothing like that. It's more eucalyptus, more of a kind of green, vetiver, woody one. The eucalyptus gives it a bit of a kind of not minty, but menthol kind of feel, mixing with the proper cannabis plant. Not awful, but you know, like a classy kind of fragrance. And I just think, again, she's a queen, isn't she? So I think Smoke for the Soul perfectly suits Queen Oona. Yeah. Next we have Jerry, who is technically Bean's uncle. He's the younger of the brothers of Dagmar's family. And yeah, now Jerry's a kind of simple-minded chap. They tried to wedge this crown on his head to make a prophecy come true, and well, it didn't go on his head, and it made him quite simple but kind-hearted. And them three kind of abuse him and treat him like crap and like a slave and stuff. But he's good, and ultimately, in the end, he sacrifices himself more or less for Bean, and he ends up going to heaven and being God's favourite person ever, really. And he's a great kind of guy, and he questions a lot of what God does, and he tells God off for being not very godly, shall we say, and asks all the questions we wish we could ask. He does get sent down again to help, but ultimately ends up back up there. No spoilers, I'll kind of go into more when I come to Luci. But yeah, he's just a kind-hearted, simple fella who just tries to help Bean and fight against evil, if you like. I don't need to really waffle on more than that. I'm trying to think what else is important about him. Nothing, although he does help bring God back to life when there's a bit of a tragedy. And what I've picked for him is probably a fair one. It's kind of the most generic one I could think about at the moment, but suiting of a God's right-hand man, if you like. And that's BR 540, Baccarat Rouge 540 from Maison Francis Kirkjean. As we all know, this is a kind of well, it's meant to be synthetic, a kind of synthetic-y, kind of rubbery smelling, reddish, saffron-y, plasticky. We know it, don't we? And it smells good, no denying that. Too strong for me. I prefer versions of it, but it's, you know, it's popular for a reason. It's a pleasant one, all right. And I think it just suits Jerry because it's kind of, you know, it's the biggest fragrance of the moment. It's kind of, everyone loves it. He's God's right hand man, and he's also quite simple, so he wouldn't need to want to have to think about what fragrance to wear or daft things like that. So for Jerry is Maison Francis Kirkjean's Baccarat Rouge. So next we're coming on to the more main characters, and the next kind of important person is Elfo. Now Elfo is an elf who comes from Elfland, which is where all the elves kind of have very appropriate names. I think it's a nice little touch to the programme that adds a bit of humour. For example, when there's some sort of shock or whatever, there's Shocko. Who does that? There's no need for that. There's Weirdo, who's a bit like there's you know, people who, whatever they're doing, their names are very literal, basically. There's Elfo's girlfriend Kissy, and they are actually related to another species in it, who I won't go too much into. I'll mention them at the end. But the Trogs, they're ultimately the same people. So the Trogs are kind of cool and funny as well. So Elfo is too badass, which is kind of funny for Elfland. He wants a bit of adventure, a bit of craziness, a bit of wildness in his life. So he ends up leaving Elfworld land or whatever, and he's the first elf to leave since Levo, surprisingly. And he ends up in Dreamland, where he meets Bean and Luci, and he's a bit in love with Bean, but obviously that's not going to go too well. She only sees him as a friend. He gets killed and they go down to hell to rescue him. He also realises he was killed by himself by travelling back in time to find out who killed him, and it ended up being him that actually killed him, so that was stuck in that weird loop. He's also quite kinky. He's obsessed with his bum bum, and he likes his bum bum slaps and all sorts of things like that. So yeah, and he likes he likes big women. Now this comes from his heritage and his dad probably, where you kind of find out he's actually half ogre. He's not a full-blooded elf. His dad fell in love with an ogre who he meets later on. Ogres and elves are supposed to be sworn enemies and all of this, and yeah, he finds a new family with them as well. And in the end, after going through his heartbreak and everything, although Bean does go without saying goodbye actually, which is a kind of sad part. But anyway, he ends up with Mop Girl. Now Mop Girl happens to be an elf. I won't really, you think she could be a really major big character, but she's not. The reveal is that she's an elf. But she's kind of there almost in the background, watching over Bean and helping Bean quite a lot actually. And becomes more of a main character. She's quite, yeah. But anyway, we're talking about Elfo. So Elfo and his wild, crazy adventures, and obviously the elves are famous for making sweets and getting waste gold in payment for them. They're kind of all a bit daft and, almost fairy tale elf-like, but with this kind of really badass side to them all, I suppose. And what I picked for Elfo is Pitching Woo. This is a fragrance from One Way Bridge. Now this is kind of a bit like a sort of ice cream, a bit peachy, peach for his bum bum. A kind of menthol, kind of humbug feeling through it. It's actually quite friendly and quite lovely, like Elfo, but it has a very much a cheeky side to it, a cheeky mature side to it, which obviously Elfo has. I just think it goes perfectly with his personality, his kind of sweetness. He's a bit sappy, he's a bit soft, he's over romantic, and he's obviously falls in love very easily with the wrong people and that. But he has a good heart and a kinky side, so why not? Pitching Woo from One Way Bridge for Elfo. And then we have the fabulous Luci, who I think is probably everyone's favourite character. He's mine. He's kind of Bean's personal demon, if you like. He's sent to Bean to cause her trouble and spy on her and all of this stuff by Dagmar's brother and sister. And ultimately he ends up just being a part of Bean and being there for him, being good. He does try and spread evil and that. People mistake him for a cat. He also dies. But more and more of who Luci really is comes out. I mean, when they go down to hell for Luci, for Elfo, he loses his wings, he loses his dreams, and his kind of wanting to be the big badass ruler of hell. You also later on find out that Satan is his father from a one-night stand or something, and he forms kind of a sort of relationship with his dad, but they're both evil, so they both play each other quite a lot. And he ends up in heaven a couple of times. He does actually kill God to change things, to help out Bean below, and make her come back to life and what have you. Which becomes his wish for bringing God back to life and not taking over heaven. He could have wished to go back down, but he gave his life to save Bean. I'm not sure Bean ever really knows the sacrifice he made, but yeah, he's funny, he's cheeky, he's constantly ribbing on people, doing naughty things, making them alive. Him and Elfo, because they're kind of opposites, do argue a bit like yin and yang with Bean. But he's just a very enjoyable character. He's funny, and he loses his head several times, and his head and his body have different kind of ways about them. He's just a great character. What I've picked for Luci is a very suiting one. It's Purple Heart from Map of the Heart fragrances. Now this is kind of a little bit Lolita Lempicka like. It's kind of a dark purple. You know, it's got sweet violets in it. It's kind of sweet. But it's got this dark black ink and smoke running through it. Kind of, it is like Luci's, kind of obviously black soul, black from hell, and also with this sweet kind of kind, loving, warm violet there. And it kind of, the fragrance is fantastic, and I just think it suits all them sides of Luci. He would be like, have a purple heart in him or whatever. I'm not going to waffle on. I've spoken about purple heart loads and Luci a fair bit now. So for Luci, who again is probably my favourite character, just for all his sides and his cheekiness and his funniness, is a purple heart from Map of the Heart fragrances. So yeah, next up is Dagmar. Dagmar is, bloody hell, I'm probably going to die in these woods. Dagmar is Bean's mother. Now at the beginning of the programme, Dagmar is frozen into stone because she's drank some poison that you don't really find out where it's from, but the poison actually was meant for Zog, and it was Dagmar that had done it to freeze that. And as the story slowly unfolds, hang on, wait for this, you find out that Dagmar is kind of behind everything that happens, and she ultimately wants Bean to become the queen. And this is because she has a deal with hell that she's made to kind of get power, that Satan, the devil, will marry the Queen of Dreamland, who is of course Dagmar herself, but also she doesn't want that. She wants it to be Bean, and she has to fulfill this prophecy and have a crown nailed to her head kind of thing. So it's all like a long story, basically. And Dagmar's brought back to life with some elf blood, which is what's needed, and that doesn't come from Elfo, because Elfo isn't completely elf. It's from Levo, but we'll get into that. No, it's not. It's actually from a tissue, from a battle with the elves. But yes, point is, anyway, she's brought back to life, and Elfo is left dead by Bean. She makes that choice. She comes back to life, Dagmar, and she seems all nice and what have you at first, and then her kind of true motives come out a little bit later on, and she turns everyone in the kingdom to stone, and then she goes back to her homeland to kind of crown Bean to make this prophecy come true and pay off this debt. Anyway, that obviously doesn't go too according to plan either, and Bean heads back for Dreamland, and yeah, Dagmar is she thinks she's killed her by blowing up the things, but she hasn't. Anyway, Dagmar kind of is seen in all of Bean's dreams and stuff. She kind of haunts her dreams, and she's actually, turns out she's living below with the Trogs, who are like her little people, because again, that they believe she's kind of the special one from a prophecy. Turns out that's Bean. Anyway, Dagmar gets more and more power. They have a big fight towards the end, and yeah, Dagmar's kind of actually left to die on her own, but she's finished off. She's crushed. Dagmar herself is obviously, she's a very attractive lady. She'd need to be, wouldn't she, to be quite so seductive and powerful, etc. She's very confident. I'm trying to think, is there isn't, you can't, I always try to look at both sides. You can't really with Dagmar, because everything she does is motivated ultimately for her own power and her own kind of self-preservation and need. She doesn't really love Bean at all. She had her to fulfill that prophecy, which is, yeah, it's a bit harsh, isn't it, really, however you look at that. So yeah, that's Dagmar. And now then, so how would I scent her? Well, I think there's a fragrance I've obviously got recently that I love, that's called QH from Redolescent, and this is kind of, it's a bit fruity, it's a bit kind of, to me, you get this dark rose, and in there some cumin and some spices and a little hint of leather. It's got, like I say, the winey booziness in there. It's just this really kind of dark, naughty fragrance. Now obviously it's based around QH, based around the Queen of Hearts, but Dagmar fits that perfectly. She's this confident, seductive ruler. She's got a very bad side. She's very kind of what's the word, ambitious, and yeah, it just is her in a bottle. Magnificent fragrance. So for Dagmar and her kind of dark queenie self is QH from Redolescent. And finally is the main character who it's all about, and that's Bean. Tiabini, Marabini, hang on. Tiabini, Maria Bini, La Rochandu, Della Rochandu, Gubinid, basically. I shall put that on the screen because I've still got it wrong, trying to remember, and I can't read my own writing. But anyway, she's the main person, and she's the princess of Dreamland. Obviously, the daughter of Zog. She's not next in line of the throne because of the way it works, although she does ultimately become the kind of regent leader, if you like, because Derek's not very great. So yeah, her story starts off, she's meant to marry Merkimer's brother, who I did remember, no, we'll leave it, and he dies. Well, she accidentally kills him. So then she marries Merkimer, well, meant to marry Merkimer, who turns into a pig, and then the wedding is cancelled, and Zog and that other king have a bit of a fight over it. But anyway, thankfully that's all cancelled, and she doesn't have to go through with that kind of terrible marriage. And then she's kind of, basically, she's a bit of a rebel. She's obviously a young lass, she just wants to live her life. Zog gives her more responsibilities, things to do. She plays the role of an ambassador for a bit, which goes disastrously wrong. She's just yeah, she's a bit unlucky. She can't really find a boyfriend or get a break because, you know, she's a princess and they don't want to get into trouble and stuff. What's his face, Luci, becomes her personal demon, and she kind of, obviously she's friends with him and Elfo, who they have adventures together and stuff. She's fascinated by Steamland and the science, as she calls it over there, and she doesn't realise her potential and her magic. So eventually she gets rescued drowning by a mermaid, Mora, who she'd released from some freak show in Steamland where Elfo was, and she kind of falls in love with her for a great amount of time. She's not sure whether she's real or not because she kind of disappears a lot, and yeah, so that's kind of Bede's story. And then obviously in the later seasons she obviously develops into a proper queen, but she doesn't want the crown, obviously. She goes off with Mora. This is after defeating her mother with all of her newfound magic and stuff to save Dreamland and save everybody there, etc. So this is Bean in a nutshell. Now Bean is, like I say, quite a loose cannon, quite youthful, fun. She just wants to enjoy her life and be like a normal person, and she gets kind of hoisted into power, if you like. Actually wasn't easy to pick a fragrance for her. There could have been many, so the one we've gone with is Amouage Interlude Woman, which is a kind of crazy fragrance. It's smoky, it's leather, it's floral, it's fruity, it's sweet, it's spicy, it's big, it's a lot of things all in once in your face. It's obviously quite posh and regal, but it's youthful, but it's mature. It's all these, a cacophony, a mixture of clashing ideas and clashing kind of styles and different scents all together, like a storm, if you like. But it all somehow works, and that is basically Bean and her personality. She has to be all these things at once. She has to be obviously a great leader, smart, but she's young and she's daft and she's having fun and she's interesting, and it does all come together really well and really nicely. And that's ultimately Bean. She's, you know, she goes from the crazy wildness to it kind of drying down to be a kind of beautiful, elegant scent, which is, you know, obviously how her life goes. And that's it. I'm not going to waffle on. I could have said so much more, but you kind of get to know Bean through all the other characters. She's a great kind of main person. If you get a chance to watch Disenchantment, I'd definitely recommend it. So yeah, that's it. So yeah, that was kind of a brief introduction to Disenchantment, a great show. Now I missed out people like the Trogs, who are like an underground version of the elves who've taken some magic kind of liquor. They're the same species, so they're magical and wonderful. They have great ceremonies like showing their moon under the moon and things like that. They're a great, I love them actually, and they have equally as kind of daft names, and they live in the kind of magic, the area that makes Dreamland magic, where there's all these wonderful mushrooms and crystals and things, and it's something to do with the steam from hell and light from heaven and all of this, and they're really interesting. Obviously there's Zog, who's the king, Mop Girl, who I've spoken about. They're important people. Any more I've missed out? There's Cesario, who's like the chief wizard, who's useless at science and absolutely everything, who marries Odval. Derek, who's the son of Oona and Zog, who's a kind of weird kid who becomes a man. I think he might be king in the end, actually. I can't remember. And he gets married to two fairies, as it happens. One of them decides she's not good enough. She's kind of like, yeah, fag smoking one. And then the other one's like a London chav wide girl who makes him into a man. so yeah, it's brilliant. It's not to be taken too seriously. Like I say, there's not too many kind of messages. Oh yeah, there's the guy who's like the leader of Steamland, who's trying to kidnap Bean to be his wife, who's played by Rich Diawadi. He's great as well. And that is ultimately it. I don't need to waffle on and on and on about it. Have you seen this show? Did you enjoy it? Do you have a favourite character? How would you scent them? This has kind of led me down a path. You don't need to know all this, of watching. Well, my nephew's a big anime fan, so I've kind of got into that. I love cartoony things. Obviously a big South Park fan, and now I've got into all these weird anime things, which I'm really enjoying. Anyway, thanks for enjoying this very long video and sticking around. Lizzie may or may not have been a special guest person, so thank you, Lizzie. It was a pleasure to have you, and this is going out when I think it's going out. It's going to be my Christmas video. So Merry Christmas one and all, and happy festivities and blah blah blah. It's not actually his birthday till March, but whatever. Have a good one. Thanks folks, bye.